Hi, so my name's Jamie. Uh, I am with MyTarot.org. A lot of people here know me already. Hold on one second. I didn't realize how blinding that light was. So this is just going to be kind of informal. Basically what it is that I finally got this book. So it's a wicked pack of cards. And I think it's been out of print for a while, is the basic gist. But I just noticed on Amazon that somebody's selling them for $80 a pop. So I ended up getting my copy off of eBay for something like $50. And I keep an eye on it, and I post on my on the MyTarot Facebook group, which I can put in the link. And also, if you want to subscribe, you can subscribe right there. But whenever I find, I've got a thing that pops up every time it shows up on eBay. And a friend of mine just bought this same book for $25, which I'm kind of jealous about. Because right now, if you check eBay, it's back up to $70 and $80. So anyway, the basic gist is I have a passion for the history of the tarot. I just really just love the history of the tarot. Me and Michael across the street are doing our own streamcast where we're going through. We've gone through all the trump cards, looking at the history and the meaning, etc., etc. And we're still doing that Wednesdays 5:30. But this is a new book that I got, and I finally on vacation started reading it. And I thought I would share at least the first 100 pages because since I came back on vacation, everything, was a lot of stuff going on. So I haven't been able to pick up the book and read. So I'm going to start reading it again, but I want to refresh myself on it. And so therefore I figured I would go through because, as you can tell with my books, it's like I have this thing where I actually do write in them, I highlight them, I go through them. And so I'm going to go through the highlighted parts here. And a wicked pack of cards, the origin of the occult tarot. So it goes into some of the history because the history of the tarot, a lot of people still think that it was brought across by the gypsies, quote unquote. I know that's not the correct term anymore, but if you read, it's like that's how they came up, and that they were originally Egyptian in origin, but there is no documentation for that. But there is documentation to show when those stories were invented. But the stories are so ingrained for the longest time. The books that were presented, or the talks, the whatever was written about it, one person had written this idea, and then another person referenced that one, and then another one referenced that one. So it created its own history. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go through this book as a refresher. And if anybody has any questions, I see we have people here on YouTube, and we also have them on Twitch. So welcome again. And of course, hello, Carla. So if there's any questions or anything like that, or any opinions, you can just throw them out. So this book was actually written in, what was this? Like 96 or something like that. I should be able to find the... And again, it's kind of out of print right now, but you can find it on bookfinder.com, AbeBooks, and on eBay. So yes, this book was written in 1996. So we've got our regular kind of contents here in the beginning. And I tell you, I'm just going to kind of flip over here so we can all see the pages, just for the fun of it. And so he goes into the preface here, and he talks about it. But the preface goes over the history. I do remember that much, and I kind of skimmed through again just to catch myself up. But as I say, I'll cover a lot of the highlighted parts and other things that I'd noticed while doing this. And I should actually have a pen here, because I know me, I'm going to... good. I always have them ready. I'm going to want to still highlight, document, and if anybody has anything interesting that they noticed or want to bring up, I will add that. It sounds like it's raining outside, too. Okay. So, tarot cards, as it starts out, tarot cards have a surprising history. They were invented in northern Italy in the early 15th century as a variation from the regular card pack already made of 4 suits and documented as early as 1370s from northern Italy. The new game, for it was a game, gradually spread to the rest of Italy. Then by 1500 to France, where the cards settled up to the modern times. The adoption in France. So it goes on and it talks about how it was adopted in France, and the card game goes on, and that the picture emerged that was that of a fascinating game whose extra series of allegorical figures had meanings only for the happy few whom the cards had been originally designed. So, and what I wanted to bring out here was, and if you are really interested in it, you can actually go through the Two of Wands and go through the history in these cards. We cover the Visconti Tarot in depth. But what they mean by allegorical figures and meanings that only some other people might get. So looking at the Visconti, is that they actually have family members of the Visconti family in there, or on the cards. And so even though we will recognize some of the cards, the people that are on the cards are actually historical figures from their own families. And so they've even figured out who each person was for the most part on each of these. And the Visconti deck is pretty much and here we have like the High Priestess. It is the tarot deck, but it was a vanity deck. So cards were very expensive. They didn't have the printing presses. So they would actually hand paint these cards. And so that's what they're saying here. The pictures that emerged was that a fascinating card game whose extra series of allegorical figures had meanings only for the happy few for whom the cards had been originally designed. So, the heavy presence of the occult tarot today should not obscure the fact that the association of the tarot with the occultist tradition, as it is generally understood, is a relatively recent product, dating back no earlier than the 18th century. So right off the bat, you're going to find that they don't cut any corners with this. They pretty much lay it out. They've got all the footnotes and the documentation. They are not soft about it in the least bit. So if people have a leaning towards the belief of the esoteric origin, the Egyptian origin of the tarot, they are not going to like this book, because they essentially just are not the nicest way of putting it, when they say that it's not, as what they say. So for good, bad, or indifference, however you feel about that. But the preface is pretty good, where it just covers some of the beginnings and etc. And then the book also next goes into when it talks about the imaginary magi. So it goes into some of the more famous people, and it even tells you, it's like, you might want to skip reading this introduction because it's going to be boring and dry. And I can say it was pretty boring and dry, but I read the whole thing because it's going to cover Hellenistic astrology, or the Corpus Hermeticum, Egyptian alchemy. So it covers a lot of the different techniques, the Kabbalah and things like that. And that, to me, all that's interesting. So of course I read it. A lot of people are going to find it dry, but it just gives you a basis before you go forward, so you get kind of an understanding. So then we go into the chapter 1, what is the tarot? And this is pretty much saying that here's where it's explaining, well, here's what it is today. You pay $35 and somebody's going to read your fortune for you. So for most people, that's the tarot. What is the tarot? It is somebody who's going to tell your fortune for money. And one of the things that's interesting in here as it goes through And I love this quote. So I've seen this quote before. I've written this quote. It's on my website, as a matter of fact. But it's something that Levi had said. Eliphas Levi declared that an imprisoned person with no other book other than the tarot, if he knew how to use it, could in a few years acquire universal knowledge. So what he was saying with that is that he's using the occult part where if you could understand the hieroglyphics of the cards, if you understood the correspondences between the Kabbalah and astrology, he's saying that you would be able to, in a few years, have the knowledge of the universe. So I think it's just interesting because for me, if you ever watch me in the mornings reading the tarot, I see the tarot as telling a story. And I absolutely see how it can relate to me and how it can relate to other people. And, because it's got the universal symbolisms. But do I see it as giving me the knowledge of the universe? Not yet. I'm still waiting for that. Let's see. And then I have in here, what do I have in here? So Levi, imprisoned person. Okay, so, but the tarot pack has certainly been standardized as regard to the number and identity of the cards. By the 1500s, the archetypical form was that which resulted from the standardization. And so they're just saying by 1450, by that point, we had the Visconti deck, and then along comes the, I did bring them all out. We have things like the Jean Noblet deck, 1659, which this is the first mass-produced woodblock cut tarot. This is Jean Noblet. So that's what they're saying about, because prior to this point here, and I think if I remember it talks about it more, prior to this point here, there were a lot of different decks, but they weren't the tarot as we knew it. They had different allegorical figures, there were different numbers of cards and things like that. So, but by this point in the 1450s, not before, the archetype forms were there. And so, and here we have, as we understand them, it's interesting because every time I go through this, originally the fool, the magician in the original tarot was called the Baghetto or the Mountebank. He was a con man. He's not the magician that most people recognize. So he was called the juggler, the mountebank, the con man essentially. And again, depend upon what deck I'm using, I'm going to see him either as a magician or I will see him as the juggler, and I will read the tarot based on whichever deck I have. So, let me see. I have a note here. For all the tarot card falls for the false history. Okay. So, again, there's just not a whole lot of books out there that go through the history of the tarot. And so in 1996, here's where they are pointing out this passage taken from Thomas Willis's doctoral thesis for the University of Alabama very well illustrates what sociologically regarded is the most interesting fact about the tarot pack, namely that it is the subject of the most successful propaganda campaign ever launched, not by a very long way to the most important, but the most completely successful. An entire false history and false interpretation of the tarot pack was concocted by the occultists, and it is all but universally believed. So again, my friends who are into the occult tarot, I understand that there are different ways of interpreting it. When I read something like this, it doesn't take away the tarot. It doesn't take away the magic of the tarot. For me, I would rather have honesty and understanding so that when I am looking at the tarot, I know the true history, I want to know what the true allegorical meanings are. For me, it's a historical allegorical meanings. For other people, it's what their masters and what they were taught from people who studied it, and they saw something different, if you know what I mean. So either way, it can mean what it means to you, but for me, I want to know the historical meanings for the cards. And so it's interesting because he goes in here, and I remember reading this because this is for a doctoral thesis, and he says, Thomas Williams says that for all its theoretical and practical importance, the history of the tarot is still a matter of controversy and debate. We simply do not know where it came from, or if someone does, he can't prove it to anyone else. The necessary facts simply don't exist. Some say it came from India, others from China. The majority view among the Western occultists is that the tarot originated in ancient Egypt. Its trumps are said to contain, in disguised form, the secrets of the teaching of the Hermes Trismegistus. Oh man, I hate pronouncing it. Trismegistus, or Thoth. This legendary book of Thoth, the tarot, survived to modern times precisely because its true nature was not understood. And then it comes down here. There is a general agreement among occult authorities that the use of the tarot was popularized in Western Europe by the wandering bands of Bohemians, gypsies, who made their appearance in the late Middle Ages. And that's where, and let's face it, that's what I heard when I first got into the tarot, when in the 80s, all you knew about the tarot was that it was, something about the Egyptians and something about the gypsies, and they skipped the rest of the history. And where he's saying that it's not traceable or documented, well, I mean, I've got a ton of books, that say, yeah, we've got it documented. We know where they came from. So, let's see. And then I'm just bouncing down here to another thing highlighted. It is not at all difficult to say, in general terms, where and when the tarot pack originated. It was invented in northern Italy in the first half of the 15th century. Indeed, anyone with an elementary knowledge of the history of playing cards would, on inspecting a tarot pack of traditional type, assign it an Italian origin on the strength of the suit signs and their arrangement on the cards. The earliest documented references to the tarot cards are from an account books of the D'Este court of Ferrara in the year 1442. A lower bound for the date of their inventions is harder to determine. It probably occurred around 1425. The earliest date with any claim to be plausible is 1410. So in other words, it is we have written documentation of the tarot around 1425. That's the first time as a game that it's ever mentioned. Let's see. Charles VI tarots are commonly identified as a fact pick. Okay, so that's just general history stuff. And what did the invention of the tarot pack consist? Playing cards reached Europe from Islamic world in the second half of the 14th century in the form of 52 cards consisting of 4 suits, 10 numeral cards, and 3 court cards each. So is this sounding somewhat familiar, like a regular deck of cards? So here is where I say that here's an opportunity, because I am not finding a whole lot written on the pips. Where did the pips come from? Where did the original cards come from? And so, here we go. And so there is, we know where they came from, because I wanted to go ahead and pull this out, because we have the cards. They came from the Middle East. So if you look here, you'll see that this looks like the swords. The only thing is that the swords ended up losing the handles. We're not sure here where the handles are, but as you can see, those swords. So with the original Mamluk cards from the Middle East. They had swords, cups, polo sticks, and polo sticks, cords, swords, cups, polo sticks, and coins. So that deck of cards came across. They say it could have been mercenaries, it could have been traders, because people are always looking to gamble. They use dice, they use cards, they use anything they can find, and so the Mamluks are just a popular form. So there's the polo sticks, there's the cups, if you look close. But again, it's like finding documentation. All these books just briefly glance over it because nobody is interested in the original. I guess because since they know about it, it's, why go into it, right? I mean, even in the Encyclopedia of the Tarot, Kaplan just touches one page out of the so I've got 2 of these volumes, and he only touches on 2 pages the Mamluk cards. So anyway, bump. Playing cards reached Europe from the Islamic world. Okay. In the second half of the 14th century, in the form of 52 cards consisting of 4 suits and 10 numeral cards, and 3 court cards each. So they had pretty much our playing cards. The suit signs, hearts, diamonds, spades, and clubs were invented by the French card makers in about 1470, 40 years or more after the tarot cards were made. And so each country, so this is from Italy, but each country seems to have their own suit signs that they like to use. Some people actually used, what are those? They had nuts, there's squirrels, there's all these, each different country said, diamonds and clubs, it's like, well, instead I'm going to use my own. And then they would print their own different suit signs. So, ancient uses, what do I have here? So, and I always do little tabs here. Oh, tarot first documentation. It is indisputable that by far the most salient use of tarot cards from the first evidence that we have of them was for playing a particular type of card game. The earliest known documentary reference from Milan occurs in a letter written in 1450 from Duke Francesco Sforza to his treasurer, asking him to send a tarot pack, or if he could not find one, an ordinary pack of playing cards. Quite obviously, he wanted tarot cards for play. If he wanted them for occult purposes, ordinary cards would have been an even inferior substitute. An edict in the city of Florence, issued that same year, lists the game of tarot under its original name of Taranfo, Tronfo, as one of those the playing of which was not prohibited. It was reiterated in 1463 and amplified in 1477. So again, we have documentation of the tarot cards, and it is strictly about gameplay. An anonymous sermon. And so this is a good point here. I do remember reading. And again, I haven't had a chance to reread this, so that's why I'm glad I'm going back over the points. An anonymous sermon included in a manuscript book of sermons compiled around 1500 and probably delivered in the 1480s, vehemently denounces tarot, along with many dice and backgammon games, as devices of the devil, but makes no mentions of any use of tarot cards save for play. Indeed, for reference from the 15th century gives any hint of any other use. So, again, you guys can't read it, so I'll just bring up my pretty little face. So again, references to the game, it's just included along with backgammon and things like that. It's impossible to understand the history of the tarot cards without recognizing that the card play was either the only use or at least the principal use to which they were put and that it was that use that largely determined the evolution of their design. Tarot cards were invented in Italy, and all the 15th century references to them are Italian. So let's see here. So, hey, Mike, although there is no documented proof that the tarot was originally used for magical purposes, there is also no proof it wasn't. It cannot be proven either way. Michael, you are absolutely right. There is also a theory that the tarot cards were brought down by aliens. Now, I am not fibbing. I actually have a book that says that because the pyramids were actually built by it's believed by the UFOs, that the hieroglyphs and things like that, and that the original tarot cards were brought down by the aliens with the hieroglyphics. And nobody can prove me wrong on that, Mike. Not a single person, can they? So I'm going to go with the theory it's aliens. And then, yeah, SM Mannix. But Michael, there aren't any references to using the cards for divination until much later. The book that I'm referencing is 1986, but the guy seemed pretty certain that that the aliens built the pyramids, and that tarot cards came from around that time. So I do have written documentation all the way back to 1986. Let me see here. And then we go here. Oh, here's a really good one. And this, so if you're just showing up, I already prefaced. And again, it's like I do have a lot of friends who are, I know people who deal with the esoteric tarot and things like that, and I absolutely respect it. And for that matter, it's like I know that when I'm reading the tarot, I actually end up going into a kind of a trance. Even though I don't believe in the esoteric side, if somebody else does, who's sitting across from me or anything like that, I'm not going to dissuade them because I just want to be a channel for whatever the beliefs are. But I had noted in the beginning of this video that these guys don't hold back. And so, and I remember this part here because I even put, I do my all these little things, and proof of gameplay only. So I do remember this section because, and Michael's actually the guy that I do the Two of Clubs with, and so I can joke with him, and he knows how I actually feel. But here, this book is stating factually, there is no room to dispute that card play was a principal use made of the cards once they were invented. They were used before. Were they used before the 18th century in any other way? On the basis of a solitary and perplexing piece of evidence constituted by a passage from a bizarre fictional work, a case can be made that the trump cards were occasionally used in the 16th century Italy for the analysis of character rather than foretelling the future. The method described in the passage involves no layout of cards, nor reading them in any usual sense of term. No particular character trait is associated with any of the cards. The method consists rather in distributing 5 or 6 trumps to each of the 4 people and then composing a sonnet for each of them, in which the names of the trumps allotted to that person are to be woven. No divinatory or esoteric significance is assigned to the trump cards. It is conceivable that the passage in the literary elaboration of a parlor entertainment of the time practiced without composing any sonnets, but the absence of any other reference to it makes this doubtful. At all events, if the cards were ever in fact used in this way, it must have been quite a minor and peripheral use of them in the first 3 centuries of their existence. Virtually the only purpose to which the tarot pack was put to play was to play a certain type of game. So, this book does acknowledge, hey, it's possible, that people had other different parlor games and things like that with it. But that's the only other reference that they have. So, and I highlighted this part here. I'm just going to read on down because it also goes on. As already remarked, these conclusions do not rule it out. Okay? that the subjects and the designs and the sequential order of the trump cards were originally endowed with some esoteric meanings, there is no questioning the symbolic character of the images on the tarot trumps. If you represent virtue of justice as a woman holding a sword and a pair of scales, you are making heavy use of symbolism. So, but he's saying that this is exoteric symbolism. And I had never heard of exoteric. I've heard of esoteric, but not exoteric until I saw it here. And, other people have seen it, and that's, because I brought that up. And but it is interesting. So, as he's saying with the woman holding a sword and a pair of scales, this is exoteric symbolism. It happens to be an instance in which the symbolism has remained familiar to us, but equally familiar to Italians of the Renaissance. The only question open to dispute is whether there is esoteric symbolism as well. Symbolism intelligibly only to those instructed in astrology or other arcane subjects. So they're saying it's like when we see the cards, we connect with them because there is symbology that we understand and it connects with it. But again, they're saying it's like, is there any documentation of any, needing to know astrology or the Kabbalah to understand it? Well, there's still no documentation to prove it otherwise. So let's see. And it goes on, people of the Renaissance reveled in hidden symbolism, and the occult sciences enjoyed greater prestige in the Christian world than any other time. But they still, as they're saying, it's like there's no documentation. So let's see. Modern uses. There are occult uses of the tarot images that are used in the 19th century. Writer left as a Levi, but I didn't highlight anything in there. I come over here and where I start to highlight. Though some argue that mathematical truth is invented, not discovered, there ought to be no disputing that historical truth needs to be discovered. Historical truth needs to be discovered. But the founders of the occultist tradition of the tarot and their successors assumed the right to invent it. Ouch. I'm just going to actually underline that because that's brutal. And again, I'm not saying that anybody's wrong because I do believe, when some people believe that truths can manifest themselves. So, so again, I'm not knocking, I'm just saying that, I'm just reading this book here. But tarot and their successors assumed the right to invent it. They made plenty of historical assertions, propounding theories of the origin and the dissemination of the tarot cards, and were free with accusations that the card makers had ignorantly misunderstood and misrepresented the original designs of the cards. Some of them issued rectified packs, which purported to restore the imagery to its pristine form, yet they remained wholly ignorant of the actual history of the tarot cards and made no effort to inform themselves. The inevitable result was that they made grave mistakes about it. The heirs of the tradition have naturally inherited those mistakes, and from the foundation of the occultist tradition in the last 2 decades of the 18th century until 100 years later, those who contributed to it were all French. So essentially what they're saying there is that, yes, so one person comes up with a thought, and then they build upon it. And I know they go on later because they're going to talk about, the Geblin when he comes up with his mom primitif and stuff like that. I know that's going to come up, and how from there Levi is going to build on that, and etc. So let's see where we go with that. Mystiques bred of ignorant, occultist neglect of certain facts concerning the tarot pack naturally led them to make serious mistakes. And I remember this part here because it talks about in the game of the game of tarot, the ranking is different, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go into that. Then here we have the chapter 2, how tarot divination began. And here we have somebody talking. So, hello, Bri445. And they're on, again, so this is being streamed on Twitch and YouTube. So Hello there from Twitch. Hi, how are you? Do you do free tarot card readings? Do I do? Oh, that question always comes up. I need to get a macro that states. So, yes, if you hang out at My Tarot, the Facebook page, and Michael, you will be happy about this. The twoofwands.net now goes to the YouTube page. The YouTube page about has all the links to everything. And also MyTarot.org has links to everything. But if you hang out at the Facebook page, contribute, help people, or ask questions so you can learn, I'll do them for free. But you can go to MyTarot.org if you want just information about me and things like that. And so, Michael, yep, the book is good as long as you can get past the harshly opinionated. Well, a biased means that they don't have. So historical, yeah, they're presenting it, but they back up their assertions with about 1,000 footnotes. And I went through the footnotes because that's one thing I always talk about is making sure that things are footnoted. And so they are biased because, I believe, because the people who are the believers of the things such as Egyptian origin and things like that are biased to the point where they discount anything else regardless of what facts are laid before them. So these guys are actually fighting against the fact that, again, somebody says they have this origin through the myths of time, but I'm not going to tell you how they know that. So you just have to believe me. So if you take a scholar, somebody like that, like these guys, because these guys are scholars, you tell them, hold on, you're telling me that it has this mythical past, but you're not going to tell me? Then they're going to just lay into it. So that's how they're doing it. If somebody would just present documentation, the tone changes. And they do give credit in this book for things like, again, not just tarot games, but there's parlor games and things like that. But they sound harsh because nobody will give them proof of anything else. Other than the fact that I do have a book in 1986 that says the tarot did come from UFOs. It's documented. It's documented proof from 1986. You can't dissuade me otherwise. So, but yes, it does sound harsh, and I know that. Some things can't be proven. I'm not talking. Okay. And I just, some things can't be proven. I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure what that means. But I am open to people's ideas. So here we go into chapter 2. And I knew this was going to be a little controversial. And Michael knows that I really sometimes I eat this up. The Game of Tarot, of the 17 cards that survived at ability. Okay, so let's see. Hasburg, Europe, talks about those, goes into how to... different countries bearing names, so it doesn't jump into the good meat of the stuff here. The Trump orders. So it is unlikely that the Tarot de Marseille ordering was an invention of the French card makers. However, for more probably it is an Italian origin. It may have been... Okay, so they're just talking about the how it began and how how the cards actually came to be, and how different countries had different types of cards that they played for trick-taking games. Whoever, you lay down your cards and you win the trick, and then, you count them from there. And so it's just talking about different countries. But 3 types of ordering of the Trump subjects were observed in Italy, and some variations within each. The Bolognese order, the angel is the highest trump, followed by the world. And so, I'm going to skip all that. So all that's saying is that prior to the Marseille deck, it was fair game. Something to see. Just making sure I read all the all the comments. Good. Okay. So, the esoteric meanings of the trumps in the 15th and 16th century, the esoteric symbolism of most of the trumps would have been apparent to all educated. Oh, I'm sorry, the exoteric. Actually, let me highlight this. So, the exoteric meanings. In the 15th and 16th centuries, the exoteric symbolism of most of the tarot trumps would have been apparent to all educated Italian. And again, not the esoteric, but the symbolism, again, where they gave the example of the of justice with the scales and the sword. We see that exoteric knowledge, common knowledge, the same way they would have seen it. So when they're playing tarot, they would have known already which cards were what. For them, their symbolic meanings would have been as obvious as it is to us that a woman with a sword and a pair of scales represents justice. So they're using that example again. Okay. It is these meanings that constitute the exoteric symbolism of the cards. The presence of this exoteric symbolism is in no way rules out that a deeper level of esoteric symbolism needing specialized knowledge, not possessed by all educated people at the time, to discern a surface meaning often coexist with another buried one. So again, Mike, there's where they're saying it's like, hey, it doesn't rule out just because we know what it means. They're saying that it doesn't rule out that there might not be a deeper meaning just because we don't know what it is at this time. The exoteric meanings of the trumps subjects, as they can be understood from the names given to them in early Italian sources and from the interpretations put them by Italian writers of the time, do not always... Okay, so it just goes on. It talks about that. And then it talks about talks about the cards themselves and how we see them for what they are. Well, actually, it kind of talks in the fact that it's like, back then, if they saw the fool... if they would have seen the magician, which they call the juggler, the battler, they would not have assumed that it was a great mage or a magi or anything like that. They would have assumed that it was just a carnival guy, a con man, a stage magician. So again, later on, we added the extra interpretations to fit. Here he is, to fit the esoteric meanings. So when you're looking at this, we have our own meanings for it in the Rider-Waite-Smith, but they would have seen this as, the first one, and since they're ordered, you have your numbers, which means that the number 8 Justice card would have taken it, or the number 2, the High Priestess, would have taken it, or as they call it, the Papist. So again, but back then, you look at these cards, and actually I have a video on how to read the tarot just by looking at the cards and seeing them just for the symbolism that they have. You don't need to look at all the 100 books I have. Anyway, so he goes on. They go on. Let's see. Oh, and we got it exactly from Michael. So cool. So the suit signs. The suit of batons is usually called the wands in occultist packs. What do I have here? Oh, this is interesting also. So, the suit signs. The suits of batons is usually called wands in occultist packs, in a crude attempt to give it a magical connotation, which its original Italian name, bastoni, wholly lacks. The term pentacles, used in occultist packs for the suit of coins, Italian denari, is more interesting since it derives from a linguistic mistake of which A.E. Waite, and this is the guy who created the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which Pamela Coleman Smith illustrated. So it's more interesting since it derives from a linguistic mistake of which A.E. Waite, who first had pentacles put on the suit signs, was completely aware. So in his writing on the tarot, Eliphas Levi asserted that the suit represented what he called pantacles, P-A-N-T-A-C-L-E-S. By this, did not mean the 5-pointed stars for which he used the word pentagrams, but talismans. So originally, what Levi said was pentacles, meaning talismans, not pentacles. In his translations from Levi's writing, Waite simply left the word pentacles untranslated, with the inevitable result that British readers thought it meant pentacles. Waite exploited, the guys, boy, they're not opinionated, are they? Waite exploited the misunderstanding for which he had been responsible by calling the suit pentacles and requiring Pamela Coleman Smith to place pentacles on the suit signs in the famous tarot pack, which she designed to his instructions. And let's see here. Can the magician be a jack of all trades? And as Michael said, yes, absolutely. So since we are also talking about, here we're just talking about the history of the tarot and the occult tarot. But when reading the deck, when reading the cards, the magician, the jack of all trades, when I'm reading them and I'm reading the Rider-Waite Smith, I see that he's got all his tools laid out in front of him. He's got the cups, he's got the wand, he's got the swords, he's got the coins. So he has all the suits, making him a jack of all trades, if you'd like, which he can use to manifest, and call down, that what we think we can make. I think we just talked about that, didn't we, Mike? What we can think we can make. First, you have to have the idea first. Or you were saying, first you have to have the wish and then, or the desire, and then you create. So that's what the magician does. So, so the tarot pack. So actually, but just to emphasize, I think that's really kind of cool. The fact that originally with Levi, it was pentacles, it was talismans. So, and that could be magical talismans or anything else, but Waite decided to say it's pentacles and put them on all of his coins. So, in France, before the 18th century, tarot cards were known only as instruments of play, probably from the very onset. Certainly by the 17th century, this was the only known use for them in Italy, even though there may have been existed an occasional lighthearted practice of using trumps to read people's characters, as we described already. In any case, our history, the history of the cartomantic use and occult interpretations of the tarot cards as they flourish today, begins in the 18th century. For those who originated and developed that interpretation and that use of the cards demonstrably owed nothing to any other prior tradition that had come down from earlier times. If there were such tradition, the founders of modern tarot occultism knew nothing of it, but there is no such tradition, and there has never been. They are really emphatic. So they're essentially saying it starts in the 18th century. That's where it's documented, and pretty much there's nothing stating that the tarot was ever used prior to that. So then they go into the beginnings of tarot cartomancy, and with the documentation as it goes into the cartomancy. And I have little things here. So, not gypsies, the end. Okay. Fortunes were written directly on the cards. So here's where it goes into the original cartomancy, where they weren't used the way that we use them as a tarot deck. So, cartomancy, the practice of foretelling the future by means of playing cards, does not appear to have been practiced in Western Europe with cards of any kind until much before the 18th century. In 1690, a special pack was designed for the purpose and issued in London by Dorman Newman and reissued subsequently by John Lentonhall. But this was not cartomancy as we understand it, based on symbolic meanings attached to individual cards. We do not actually hear of ordinary cards being used for fortune telling before the second half of the 18th century, though it may date from a decade or two earlier. It is possible that the practice existed amongst the Russian peasantry before it originated independently in Western Europe, but this is little more than a guess. The use of tarot cards for cartomancy appears to have begun not in France but Bologna, where the game was much played. The 62-card Bologna tarot pack, Tarocchi Bolognese, differs greatly from the Tarot de Marseille, both in its design and order and nomenclature. So, in Bologna they did cartomancy, but using their deck, not the tarot deck. And the difference is that if we go down here, because I have a big handwritten note here to come down here, the Tarocchi Bolognese probably began to be used for fortune telling sooner than the French tarot deck, a single loose manuscript giving cartomantic interpretations of 35 cards of the Tarocchi Bolognese was discovered by Franco Patesi at the Library University of Bologna, and the meanings are as follows. So, literally, they have these decks, and you would write the meanings on them. And so we have a document, and you can see that it's not like what we have. So angel would be wedding and settlement, world is long journey, sun is day. And so they would write them on the cards themselves. These interpretations do not derive from Attila and do not follow his principle of different meanings for the suit cards, according to whether they are placed right way up or upside down. So Attila, I believe, is going to pop up. Yeah, Attila is going to pop up later on. Jean-Baptiste. So, Aliette. So he will pop up later on. Let's see. The first mention of fortune telling in France by means of tarot cards is the same mode. It occurs in a book on cartomancy with the ordinary pack of 32 cards supplemented by one other, written by the professional fortune teller who called himself Attila, with whom we shall be much concerned. The book was first published in Amsterdam in 1770 under the title, I'm not going to read the French title, I'm just going to say Attila, or A Way to Entertain Oneself with a Pack of Cards. It had okay, so Attila says that everyone knows that there are other methods of divination, including the reading of tarot cards, coffee grounds, and egg whites. This remark was for some reason deleted in later editions, but at that date, Attila had no pretensions as an occultist. Not only these other methods of divination that he mentions in passing, but the method of cartomancy with ordinary playing cards, which his book expounds, are treated by other authors as are treated by Attila as mere entertaining diversions, not a serious technique for penetrating the veil of the future. The connection between tarot cards and high magic had yet to be made, and Attila himself was to play a critical part in making it. So, yeah, essentially, and even I have a deck of cards here from early in the 20th century. Because it was a popular way of fortune telling. So here we have the mastermind knows world over. So even into the 20th century, they were still doing the same thing, taking the cards, and they would add the fortunes to them. And they explained how you would use these to read your fortunes. Because obviously, wearing a Swami's cap, this guy knows what he's talking about. So, but, so it's always been popular since the 18th century, or the 1800s, to use regular playing cards for reading fortunes also. Let's see. So the founders of tarot occultism, and here's where we come into, and this is part of the reason why it's hard to take, why it takes Decker and Dulles and Dummett, why it's hard for them to take a lot of this stuff serious, because Anton Court de Geblin wrote an encyclopedia, and I already knew this before reading this, where he would just invent his facts. So I think it's like 8 or 9 volumes. And if he didn't know something, he just invented it. And so there's this whole book, this whole series talking about that. I mean, he has this whole encyclopedia, which they can't prove he's wrong. And as you say, it's like, how can you prove somebody, how can you prove a negative? They're not going to go to Africa to see if, somebody's got a face below their necks, You're not going to. And so you just accept it as fact because it's in a book. If it's on the internet, it must be true. It's my theory. So, and I go through here. So, Anton Court de Geblin. The entire esoteric tarot tradition stems ultimately from the work of Anton Court de Geblin, a Protestant pastor, a Freemason, and a savant. And then they go into his history. They go into his birth and the irritating puzzle of when he died. All this other fun stuff like that. Court de Geblin and how he enters France and all this other stuff, living in Switzerland. And then Court de Geblin as a savant. It was during the 1770s that Court de Geblin plunged into the heady waters of occultism. He was initiated into Freemasonry as a member of the Lodge of Les Amis Arenuis. Founded in 1771, he subsequently joined yet another more famous Masonic lodge, the Les Neuf Soeurs, Soeurs if you care, of which he became the secretary in 1778, and to which Voltaire and Benjamin Franklin also belonged. So, there we go. Goes into how it came about. And then in 1772, Court de Geblin published a prospectus inviting subscriptions for his learned work in many volumes, The Monde Primitif. And this is that encyclopedia I'm talking. More than 1,000 subscriptions were forthcoming, the royal family putting themselves down for 100 copies. 9 volumes of this enormous work appeared from 1773 until 1782. And yeah, I know that he didn't finish it because he ended up dying before then. Other texts. So it goes in, it talks about it within the 9 volumes, what is published, Etymology, nor in view of the subsequent success of. Yeah, he did a lot of stuff. He just invented a lot of stuff, is what they're saying. But he did publish the first essay on the tarot. Among the more absurd results. Oh man, they have an opinion. Just because it's written or not written doesn't make it true. It does too. Just ask the internet. I've got memes to prove you wrong. Just because it's written or not written doesn't make it true. I have memes. I have stacks of memes that proves if it's written, it's true. But the first published essay on the tarot. And actually, I just laugh at this because it's like, God bless them. They're very well documented, right? But boy, they just want to throw things out like this. Among the more absurd, and there is a bunch of absurd stuff in there. It's just really harsh to do that. Among the more, and it's good to be skeptical and search for facts. It's also good to not dismiss the unknown. Well, there is cynical and there's skeptical. Cynical is when you're just dismissing something. That's being cynical. Skeptical, when you're skeptic, you're actually looking at facts. You're looking for the documentation. You're being skeptical because you want to see the facts. You're being cynical when you just blow it off. Among the more... Okay, I'm not going to read the absurd part again. Insights into the origins and the ground of his inclusion in this book. An essay on the tarot contained in the Monde Primitif, Volume 8, published in 1781. All his other bizarre speculations have long been forgotten. This one essay continues to be read as having been the fountainhead of the entire tarot mystique. There's no reference to the tarot in the detailed plan of the entire book, with which Volume 1 begins. Volume 5, however, published in 1778, contains the etymological dictionary of the French language in which the old-fashioned form of the word Tarux, Tarraux, is listed. The entry reads, game of cards well known in Germany, Italy, and Switzerland. It is an Egyptian game, as we shall demonstrate one day. Its name is composed of two Oriental words, tar and ra, or ro, which means royal road. So, he's saying it's an Egyptian game that we shall demonstrate one day. Its name is composed of two Oriental words, tar and ra, ro, which means royal road. Must therefore have been before 1778, after 1773, that Corp de Geblin formed his ideas about the tarot. We shall see, however, that there is some reason to think that he was already possessed of them by 1776 when Volume 4 came out. How he came to form those ideas is described... Ooh, I just lost electricity. Did I lose... Are you people still there? Did I lose my stream? Okay. Somebody just acknowledge that you're still there, because we are losing electricity. Still here. Okay. Wow. Michael, you guys losing electricity over there? And just so people know, love Michael to death. We always go through this. Okay. 3 of Cups. Okay. Hi. Okay. All good. Okay. Anyway. So, he came to form those ideas as described in his essay with the following words. A few years ago, invited to visit one of the ladies of our acquaintance, Madame L.C., who had arrived from Germany or from Switzerland. We found her occupied in playing this game with some other people. We play a game which you surely do not know. That may be, what is it? The game of tarots. I have occasion to see it when I was very young, but I had no idea of it. It is a rhapsody of the most bizarre, the most extravagant figures. Here is one of them, for example. I take care to choose the one displaying the greatest number of figures, one which has no relation to its name. It is the world. I scrutinize them, and suddenly I recognize the allegory. Everyone abandons the game and comes to look at this marvelous pack of cards which I have perceived what they have never seen. Each one shows me another card. In quarter of an hour, the pack has been run through, explained, and declared Egyptian. And since this is in no way the product of our imagination, the effect of the deliberate and perceptible connections of this pack with everything that is known of Egyptian ideas, we promised ourselves one day to make it known to the public. We were convinced that the public would take pleasure in a discovery and a gift of such a kind. An Egyptian book escaped from barbarism, from the ravages of time, from accidental and deliberate conflagration, and from what is even more disastrous, ignorance. This ignorance is the inevitable effect of the frivolous and light-hearted form of this book, which has enabled it to triumph over the ages and to come down to us preserved with an exceptional fidelity. The ignorance in which we have been until now of what is represented has been a fortunate safe conduct which has allowed it to pass peacefully through all the centuries without anyone having thought to destroy it. It was time to rediscover the allegories which it had been destined to preserve, and to reveal that amongst that wisest of peoples, everything, even including games, was based on allegory, and that those sages knew how to change the most useful knowledge into an amusement and make it into no more than a game. So, the reader will recognize the source of many ideas of Thomas A. Williams' quoted chapter. Okay, so there's somebody else that actually had that idea. And de Geblin even puts that guy's essay in here. And it turns out that it was probably written before he, quote unquote, discovered the Egyptian origin just by staring at it, and they kind of go into that. It had for centuries. So okay, so according to Court de Geblin's account, a book of antique wisdom had been deliberately disguised by ancient Egyptian sages as a pack of cards used to play a special game. It had for centuries survived as an instrument of play, unrecognized as anything more than that. It had survived because it was not recognized as anything more. Its secrets had remained unpenetrated until Court de Geblin, calling on Madame Lassie, had been inspired to interpret her game and to divine its long-forgotten symbolism, and hence to infer its origin and the intention of its inventors. So he did not pretend to have derived his knowledge from any ancient tradition orally transmitted. Quite the contrary, according to him. No such tradition existed for long ages. No one had suspected the truth until he himself, with his genius, perceived it as uncovered. So this is where this is the root. This is the root of our esoteric traditions with the tarot. So okay, yeah, it goes on, and yes, it's in his book. It's in he did that. So casual divination with the cards was not taken very seriously today. Probably it goes more into the Atella. So, and then Tarot, T-A-R. Okay, so I have notes all up and down the side here. When Court de Geblin was writing, the Rosetta Stone had not yet been deciphered by Champollion. Hieroglyphics remained unreadable, and the ancient Egyptian language was unknown. That did not deter the savant. Genuinely erudite, he never hesitated to invent a fact if he did not know it. The word Taro, he informs us, is composed of the Egyptian words tar, meaning road, and ras, or rag, meaning royal. It is perhaps superfluous to remark that neither word figures in Wallace Budge's Egyptian dictionary. As for the name P-A-G-A-D, the French version of the Italian baguetto, it derives from pag, master, and gad, fortune. The figure on the trunk. So, before the Rosetta Stone, you could pretty much say whatever you wanted, is what they're saying. And what he said is that tar and row, royal road, there's no foundation for it. And it's never been proven on the Rosetta Stone or anything else. Oh, and hold on one second here so I don't lose electricity. Okay, there we go. It had come unplugged. So, tar and row. Nobody can point to anything that says this is an Egyptian word or an Oriental word or an Egyptian word or anything like that. So it goes on to how he renames the Pope and the Popus. He did that obviously to de-Christianize it. In his essay, Court de Geblin discusses each of the trumps in turn. He renames the Pope, the fifth card, the High Priest, or Chief Hierophant, it being evidently necessary to de-Christianize this card. If an Egyptian origin was to be attributed to it, he likewise renames the Popus to the High Priestess. The name Popus he terms ridiculous, ascribing it to inventions of German card makers. He could naturally admit no Christian symbolism in a book devised by ancient Egyptians. The triple cross held by the Pope he asserts to be absolutely Egyptian. Love he labels marriage, while trumps 8, 11, and 12, and 14, misnumbered 13 by Court de Geblin and his illustrator, represented the four cardinal virtues that trumps 8, 11, and 14. Virtues evident, but the statement is surprising as applied to trump 12, which is the Hanged Man. So, I'm just going to go on and I'll just read as it here. I'm sure it covers it because, let's see. Court de Geblin confidently asserts, however, that the miserable and presumptuous card makers misunderstood the card, having made a grievous mistake thereby completely disfiguring the hangman, and that the figure should be shown upright, standing on one leg, rather than hung upside down by one foot. In her illustration, Mademoiselle Lenotte depicts the figure as one standing on one leg, in accordance with the Geblin's interpretation. He tells us further that the figure represents the otherwise missing virtue of prudence. So, in other words, he saw that, and he needed something to, to be prudence, and so I guess that one's as good as any. So I'm just pulling up my Noble here to see what he was looking at. He was either looking at the Convert or the Noble. Probably. Tell you, here we go. So here we have prudence. And this is the Noble deck. And he's saying that this is somebody river dancing. Okay. And I'm not, like I said, I'm just having fun with this. Again, I can compartmentalize stuff, and I do that. It's like I just want to know the actual history before I compartmentalize something. So I'm not just accepting. Again, I guess I am skeptical. I try not to be cynical, but I want to be skeptical with things, especially in this day and age. You can't just take things for granted. When somebody tells you something, because in this day and age, people are just throwing all kinds of crap out. So anyway, apart from being entirely wrong as a matter of historical fact, this interpretation overlooks the fact that the virtues are almost always represented by female figures, but Court de Geblin here, inaugurating the occultist tradition of rectifying by blind guesswork and traditional imagery. Okay, so he goes on, and then what do we have here? Mentions Hebrew alphabet. So the set of 21 and 22 trumps, etus, the 12th letter of the Egyptian alphabet, common to the Hebrews and the Orientals, which also served as numerals, are necessary in order to keep. So he goes in here. So this is where we start touching on Kabbalah and Hebrew alphabet and stuff like that. There were not, of course, 22 Egyptian letters, but there were indeed 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Court de Geblin's remark, of which he himself makes nothing, was the first suggestion of an association between the tarot trumps and the Hebrew letters, an association which was subsequently to play an absolute central role in occultist theories of the tarot. So, and that is very true. So far we know that de Geblin is the first person to apply the Egyptian meanings to the cards, the history, and that also he's the first one to mention the Hebrew alphabet tied with the tarot cards. So, Comte de Mellet. So, all of Court de Geblin's fanfare and the rediscovery of the Egyptian book was calculated to produce great expectations in its readers. Such readers must have found the interpretation expounded in the body of the essay a pathetic anticlimax. Was it only to communicate to posterity so banal a message that those sages of antiquity had been to the trouble of ingeniously devising a disguise as a pack of playing cards as to preserve so this really is written in a scholarly what's that term I'm looking for when something is written dry and by scholars? Anyway, so this disappointment was part addressed by a second essay by another hand. Okay, so on which in volume 8 of the Monde Primitif, Court de Geblin appended to his own, he had referred to it in the Discourse Préliminaire at the beginning of the volume. Essentially, it's when we look at Comte de Mellet, which you'll hear that name occasionally if you look at the history. He had written an essay, if I'm remembering correctly, that got inserted into the Monde Primitif, and it actually appears as if that was written before de Geblin. And that de Geblin got the idea from that, and then he turned around and included that essay into his Monde Primitif. And hold on one second. I'm actually recording right now. I love you so much. Bye-bye. Yeah, but in a second, okay? I love you. Bye. I am recording. Yeah, okay. Nope. I I know you can't. I'm in the tarot room right now and I'm recording. Okay. Um I love you and I'll talk to you in a little bit. When you're okay. Okay, love you. Bye. I didn't tell her I was recording in here and she's coming home late. And I love her very, very much. So, where was I? We were talking about. Is that rude of me or what? I should cut that out, right? Nope, I have a life. So, and again, yeah, so, the Comte de Mellet. So, refers again in his second essay more clearly. This essay followed by a dissertation in which it established how the game was applied to the art of divination. It is the work of a general officer, governor of the province, who has honored us by his kindness and has, with a most ingenious prospecticity, rediscovered in this game the Egyptian principles governing the art of divining and the future means. These principles were characteristic. Okay, and now here's where we learn about the gypsies. These principles were characteristic of the first bands of Egyptians misnamed Bohemians, gypsies are meant, who spread over Europe. There still remain some vestiges of these principles in our pack of cards, but they are infinitely impoverished by the monotony of the packs and the small number of figures in them. So, he, again, come to de Geblin, inserted de Mellet's essay in there, and de Mellet is the one who brings up the fact that it was brought by the Bohemians, first bands of Egyptians, misnamed Bohemians, gypsies, who spread them over Europe. So, just as with the casual reference to the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, Court de Geblin here, with a passing remark, planted another seed destined to grow into an immense tree. His official theory that the tarot cards would have been brought to Rome by Egyptians in the days of the empire and carried from Italy to France many centuries later by the Avignon popes. But now, in the passage quoted, he suddenly mentions the gypsies as the disseminators of the cards. In his time, the gypsies were still believed to have originated from Egypt, as they had given out when they first arrived in Europe, and as their English name gypsies indicated. In French, they are called Bohemians from the fact that they reached Western Europe via the eastern part of the continent. So, again, it goes on, and so that's where essentially we learn about the history and how it came from the gypsies. So let's see. It goes on more about Comte de Mellet, yet he contributed an essay on the tarot considerably more impressive. Comte de Mellet's was incredibly more impressive than de Geblin's own. I have highlighted there. De Mellet, too, believed the tarot pack to be an ancient Egyptian origin. He, too, thought it contained symbolic representation, teachings of ancient Egyptian sages. He, too, believed that the trump cards must be taken in descending order to arrive to the correct interpretation. So, again, he's agreeing with de Geblin, but, again, the assertion here is that de Geblin probably got it from de Mellet. De Mellet art. Okay, so we cannot avoid the conclusion. Oh, and here's where it talks about it. I've read about it before, but we cannot avoid the conclusion that de Mellet already had these ideas independently of Court de Geblin and wrote his essay and sent it to him without knowing of his claim to be their originator. Could it be then that two men arrived at essentially the same conclusion independently? That is possible, especially given the prevalence of Egyptmania at the time. but it's hardly probable. But if we reject it as improbable, we must convict Court de Geblin of falsehood, at least unintentional. The ideas he claims as original to him must already have been current in a certain milieu, which means that he might have heard it in a parlor somewhere. Freemason, he's a Freemason. They discussed all these things, so maybe both of them heard it at the same place, and maybe he just forgot. I mean, they are being that kind to him, saying maybe he just didn't remember. Dummett, though, is the first person to name Thoth and Hermes Trismegistus. In Dummett's essay, he calls the Book of Thoth. He agrees with Court de Geblin that the Tarot Pack was in intention and in fact a book. He calls this book the Book of Thoth. So we have Dummett first naming that. Explaining called the Book of Thoth, explaining the word tarot as derived from the Egyptian tarosh. The initial T is just the definite article. A means doctrine or science, and Rosh, the Egyptian name of Mercury or Thoth. This Thoth or Mercury is not understood by Dummett as a god, but as a human being of great antiquity who was the first historian and who made pictorial images of the gods. He is obviously Hermes Trismegistus under the equivalent name. But the word Rosh, Dummett tells us, also meant beginning, hence the book Tarosh is particularly concerned with cosmogony. Thank you. Dummett regards the Book of Thoth as having originally consisted of only 22 pages, corresponding to the 22 trumps. In his interpretation of the trumps, that Dummett shows himself Court de Geblin superior in plausibility. The sequence is divided into 3 sets of 7 cards. Okay, so they go into now he starts going into how to read some of the stuff. And I'm just going through the highlighted stuff here. Dummett treats all the trumps in descending order. The first septenary. Okay. So this section here kind of goes into, and it's very dry, separating the trumps into 3 stacks, using those, and then reading from there. Or like the second. Okay, yeah. And so I'm not going to. I would have to read the entire chapter by the book, page 69. But on my notes, trumps in descending order. Dummett's cards explained. Let's see. Dummett believes the Hanged Man correct, but still prudence. So Dummett is contradicting what de Geblin's saying, that the Hanged Man is correct. De Geblin evidently based his interpretations on a Tarot de Bescon pack differing from the Tarot de Marseille, only in replacing the Pope and Popus on trumps 5 and 2 with Jupiter and Juno. So I've got a deck, and so since Dummett wasn't using the Tarot de Marseille, the Pope and the Popus were already replaced with Juno and Jupiter in the deck that he was familiar with. So Mellett's reliance on the Tarot de Bescon, which was primarily in use among German-speaking players in Switzerland, and suggested he was aware of the Tarot de Marseille packs that he was unaware of the Tarot de Marseille packs being produced in great numbers in Marseille. Okay. Cards are also okay. So, without going through all that, yes. So this, again, it's an interesting chapter, but you have to read the whole thing to really get the nuts of it. And then it goes into Attila, the first professional cartomancer. So I started this at 4:30. You know what? I am going to stop here on chapter 4, which I am thoroughly enjoying this. But I'm going to stop here at chapter 4 because we are already an hour and a half into it. So, what I want to do is that I'm going to pick another day, and I am going to continue on And maybe we'll just end up going through this whole book together if anybody is interested in that. So let's just go ahead and call it from there. But we did learn a lot. We did learn that the Geblin is the first one to come up with the, in his Mon Primitif, the Egyptian connection, naming the tarot. We learned about the gypsies. We learned that the Mellet came up with the idea of Egyptian and the Bohemians and et cetera, things like that. So, so that is actually really, really interesting. And so I know going into Attila is the first professional cartomancer. So that's where the next chapter goes into. And interesting enough, he didn't use the tarot the way that, again, right off the bat, the way that we're familiar with it. He started off with words written on cards. So with that, I will set up another time, and I want to thank everybody very, very much. This was amazingly interesting for me, and it helps me to lock this in. And I will be doing my readings tomorrow. So thank you, everybody, Michael, Carla, and everybody else who's on here. I really enjoyed this a lot. And if you like stuff like this, let me know. And again, don't forget to subscribe. Where are you at? There you go. Subscribe. There it is. Okay. And let me know if you're interested in more stuff like this, because I love reading these books. I go through these books, and this is just a way for me to lock it in. So again, take care, everybody. Have an amazing day. Have an amazing week. All that wonderful stuff. And thank you very, very much. Take care. Oh, well, actually, Joey, it's recorded if you're interested. And again, I should say that this is the book. And again, every time I see it for a good price, I'm going to post this on the MyTarot Facebook page. And Michael, he got it for $25 when I posted it. I paid, like I say, $50 or $60 for it. So I will keep posting it on the Facebook page when it comes up, because it is a good book. So thank you all very, very much. And so thank you all. Wow. Take care, and I will talk to you all later.